Okay, this is video 3 in the series of how I'm organizing my things from a chaotic, messy inbox, which, if you'll recall, I had about a month's worth of stuff that I'd just thrown in there. So in the first video, we went through organizing. Shuffling is probably a better word. We shuffled the things from my inbox into category level inboxes that mirror my Johnny.Decimal structure. But they are explicitly still not organized. We didn't make any attempt to organize them. So all we've really done is break one big bucket of unorganized stuff into smaller buckets of still just as disorganized stuff, which is fine. And that's actually what it turns out I'm doing. It's been a couple of weeks since that first video. And then the second video, we talked about my priority continuum. And it's been a few weeks, which has been quite interesting because that's let me actually run this process organically, and I have shaken these things out and I think they're working quite well. So let me show you what I'm doing. One thing I've realized in doing this for the last couple of weeks is, I think this is really important, I'm still not someone who enjoys being told what to do, right? Even though I'm the one telling me what to do, because I'm the vast majority, it's not as if I've got a job where I've got a boss telling me what to do. The vast majority of things in my to-do system are things that I decided I might like to do, right? So it's not, it's a bit funny. But I think it's worth emphasizing that the things in my things are things that I might like to do, the things that I have decided are worth doing. Or there are things that I think are the next good thing to do in my business. So it's good stuff that past me thought was a good idea. And I need to start reframing it like that. Less as this list of chores to get through, because I tend not to put chores in my things, and more as a list of opportunities. And I swear I didn't plan that because that sounds really cheesy, but in a way it's kind of true, right? The other thing to think about here is that you can not, and again, I'm talking after having, a good few weeks of just working this since the last video. You can't let this be a point of pressure for yourself. Only you will make this a point of pressure, and you'll do that by assigning unrealistic or too many due dates, and then feeling overwhelmed when you come into a system that's just constantly insisting that you do things, because there's a difference, as we'll see, as we spoke about in the last video, between insisting that you do a thing, priority 1 and 2, and then just there being a list of ideas of things that you might like to do, priorities 3 and 4. Make sure you are not putting things in priority 1 and 2, because otherwise this becomes a chore and you reject the system. So that's very important. Okay, so let's look at some of my specific categories now. Just to reinforce, we are still, and there's a diagram, I'll summarize all this at the end, we are still in the review process here. We're not doing anything yet. There are still tasks here, many tasks that are still things to do. What I'm doing here is organizing and shuffling my chaos into neat lists of things that I can then decide to do later. So here's the original version of my category 24, processes and procedures, which is from the small business system. This is what it looked like after I just threw a bunch of stuff from my high level things inbox into category 24. And this is interesting because this process, this iterative process of going round and round from a high level inbox to a low level inbox and then organizing that low level inbox, is what we're going to keep doing. So even though we had, when we started this video series, I had 70 some items in there in my inbox. You're never going to have 70 some items in your inbox, hopefully, but we do the same process whether you've got 1 or 5, daily. So it's actually been quite interesting in that regard as well. So then this is what it looks like post cleanup. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to show you a few of these examples. And then what I did when I was going through these was I recorded the different types of thing that I did to each task. So rather than going through them all with you, I'm just going to summarize at the end. So you can see in my post cleanup here, this is what it looks like now. A whole bunch of stuff has just disappeared, and what remains is really neat and has been organized into headers that reflect my Johnny.Decimal structure. Let's have a look at 31, marketing, PR and comms. It's very similar. There was piles of unorganized stuff before, and now afterwards there's a bit more remaining, especially if we turn on this show later items option, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. So here are the types of action that I took on all of these things. And again, there's a short, small diagram at the end just to summarize these. So if there were tasks that took 2 minutes or less, I just did them. So for example, this one here, check out this guy's LinkedIn profile. That was just a thing. I went over to LinkedIn, I had a look at his profile. There was no particular action there. I wanted just to look at how he did some marketing things. That was it, job done. Then I think probably the majority of tasks are P3s, which are those tasks that are things you would actually like to do, but that don't have a due date. And they got tidied up and remained in the category that they were. So if they were in 31, they remained in category 31. So P3 is by definition anything that you can still see, such as these two screenshots, that when in things you've got this option hide later items, and that hides things that you've assigned to someday. So P3s are things that remain when you hide the later things. And this is the bulk of your system. This should be most of your stuff. No pressure from a date, but it's actually a thing you'd quite like to do. Because then P4s were those memory joggers, not really to-dos, borderline not even a task. A lot of those also remained in the category. And what I've done with those is assign them the date in things of someday, which has this really nice effect of being able to hide them with this option. So when you click that, they all just disappear. And then the only time I necessarily look at them is when I review this category again. I also tried this idea of not having each of these someday items as its own thing, but instead creating one task just called P4s for this category. I think it needs to be a category level task. And things has this concept of check boxes, checklists, but you could just use bulleted lists, it doesn't matter. And throwing things in there. The advantage to this is now you only have one task, and it contains all of that stuff that you might like to do one day. The disadvantage is you lose the ability to keep notes alongside these individual items. So I've actually found myself not doing so much of this. I think it's worth thinking about the fact that something you might like to do in the future, in the far future, probably needs more notes to remind yourself when you eventually get there what it was about. Because a one-line thing in 3 months, there's a very good chance you're going to forget what that even was, right? But then keep an eye on how many of these someday tasks you have. If you find yourself with dozens and dozens of them, that is probably a sign of a system out of control. And I wonder if part of I'm not there yet, but I wonder if part of my category review process, which is an ongoing process, is looking at how many of these somedays there are. And if there are more than some arbitrary number, call it half a dozen per section or whatever, then just making a decision to delete some of them and recognizing that you can't possibly do all of these things. And by the time you got to the point where you had time to do them, they're probably not even relevant anymore. So, ideas just fade away, don't they? So just be realistic there. So let's just reinforce my priority continuum. P2s are things that have a date, and that will pop it into the today view where it will stay. You can just take that date off if you would like. P3s, and there are very few of those. P3s are just tasks that are available to do that have no date. They are the majority of my things. And P4s are tasks that I have assigned someday, so they get hidden, which is really nice when you click the hide later thing. P1s, I'll do a separate video about my due system that I mentioned last time. There are no P1s in things. So that's one of the, there's a long way around seeing how I took each of these items and assigned a priority based on giving it a date and deciding where it should be. Some of the other things I did to each of these tasks were what I've got here under my category header of just hygiene, right? I have improved the titles of things. I added a JD.ID in square brackets to the end of one of them because the job is in my marketing category, but I've got a creative output that relates to the job. So I just help myself out with a reminder there. I tend to put JD.IDs in square brackets in situations like this because I see it and I think that I know what that is if it's in square brackets. I linked a couple of tasks together. One of them is a P3 active and the other one is a someday. So I need to do that one first, but then I've given myself a note in there. Once you've done this one, go and look over here. I merged a couple of tasks because they were essentially the same thing. I untodayed a few tasks that were marked as today. And then when I got into the review, I said they don't need to be done today. They just need to be done whenever. And tellingly, they're still there. And that's weeks ago. Some things I'd already actually done, so I checked them off, and some things I just decided were not worth doing, so I deleted them. So let's just have a quick look at that on a diagram. And this is basically what I just said, but I'll just reinforce it here. So starting from the top, you have some sort of idea, or someone tells you what to do if you're at work. That goes into your system level inbox. And this process should be agnostic to the application. There's nothing special about things in here, other than the way it handles dates and put things on today. But this review process has nothing to do with things, really. You can do this in anything. So we have an idea, it goes into your system level inbox. About once a day. I'm realistically doing it 4 times a week, give or take. What you should do is take the things out of that inbox and put them in a category inbox with very little thought, because we're going to get to the category review. So when you look at each of those items, if you know it can wait until the category review, which will typically be within a week or 2, just chuck it over there. That means you can just chuck things out of your inbox, and you want that to be the least friction thing in the world. Because then for each of our categories on a weekly review, and this is what I'm going to talk about in the next video, that's when you do the thing I've just talked about, where you look at each of these tasks, and then for each of them, you either do one of the following things. You either just do it, you complete the thing. You decide it wasn't worth doing at all, you delete it. If it is worth doing and you're going to keep it, you set a date and some sort of, therefore assigning it one of your priorities. And also probably tidy it up and give it some more notes and just make sure it's really nice and neat, and put an ID in the subject if you need to. And now that becomes a well-organized task that is just waiting to be done at some point, which of course in the future will just get done, and that's now done. Or, and this is crucial, what you can do, and I found myself doing this quite a lot, is if you've chucked something into a category without giving it too much thought, and then when you look at that category later, you think, oh, this isn't an item for this category, this isn't for 31, this is for 25, just chuck it over to 25. Again, as long as you understand that it can wait for 25's review cycle to come round, next video, then just chuck it over there. Things even has a very nice shortcut for this. You can hit Shift Command M to move an item, and then just start typing the name or the number, which is really nice, of a category, and hit return, and that item will just get slung over there, and that's nice and simple. All right, that was a pretty quick overview. I'm going to keep doing videos as I use this system myself. The next one will talk about how my daily category review cycle works, such that I'm confident that everything in a category gets looked at least once a week or 2.